7 feet tall, 10-foot wingspan, eyes like taillights. The Mothman of Point Pleasant terrorized West Virginia for 13 months and may have predicted tragedy. Want to hear more? Stay tuned for tonight's Monster File here on the Dark Folio. Hey there, I'm May, and welcome to the Dark Folio. Think of this as your creepy little coffee break. We're talking folklore, hauntings, true crime, all the delicious dark stories that make you lean in and listen a little closer. 15 to 20 minutes of the strange, the unexplained, and the absolutely fascinating. So grab your favorite mug, get comfortable, and let's dive in the darkness together. Tonight we're diving into one of America's most chilling cryptid encounters, a story that began on a dark November night in 1966 when two young couples took a drive that would change their lives forever. Picture this, you're driving down a lonely country road in West Virginia, the headlights cut through the darkness ahead, and suddenly something massive unfolds from the shadows, something with glowing red eyes and wings that span the width of your car. This is the story of the Mothman, a creature that terrorized Point Pleasant, West Virginia for 13 months and may have predicted one of the town's greatest tragedies. Let's open tonight's Monster File. November the 15th, 1966, Roger and Linda Scarberry, along with Steve and Mary Millette, two young married couples from Point Pleasant, decided to take a late-night drive to the TNT area. Now, this sounds like maybe a strange place to go. The TNT area was an abandoned World War II munitions facility filled with concrete igloos that once stored explosive. But these couples were young. They were looking for someplace exciting, something to explore. I grew up in a rural area. You're trying to get out and just find something to do. And this was a perfect place to go check out. And maybe the perfect place for something to hide. As they drove past the old North Power Plant, Linda Scarberry spotted something near the building. At first she thought it was a man. But as their headlights swept across the figure, she realized that this was no man at all. The creature stood nearly 7 feet tall, humanoid in shape, but covered in gray leathery skin. Its most terrifying feature, two massive hypnotic red eyes that glowed like taillights in the darkness. But then it moved, and that's when the couple saw its wings, enormous bat-like appendages that stretched 10 feet from tip to tip. Well, Roger floored the accelerator, but here's where the story gets truly nightmarish. The creature didn't chase them on foot. It took to the air, following their speeding car down Route 62, and we're not talking about a brief flight. This thing kept pace with their vehicle as they reached speeds of over 100 miles per hour. The couples made it to the Mason County Courthouse, where they breathlessly reported their encounter to Deputy Sheriff Millard Halstead. What made their case so compelling was that Halstead knew these couples. He'd grown up with them. They weren't troublemakers or attention seekers. They were genuinely terrified. But the Scarberry-Millette sighting was just the beginning. Over the next 13 months, Point Pleasant became ground zero for one of America's most concentrated cryptid flaps. Now, if that term is new to you, cryptid flap, well, it actually refers to a localized period of increased sightings and reports of a specific cryptid. So if you ask Google what that means, it's that these events are characterized by a higher than usual concentration of sightings within a specific geographic area and time frame. And that term flap itself, when used in this context, implies that it's an increased state of public awareness and interest in the cryptid, often fueled by the heightened reports. You can hear the word flap when it's referred to Bigfoot or UFOs or any type of phenomenon that is being discussed. And at this point, it was definitely concentrated in this area. The creature was spotted over 100 times by dozens of witnesses, and the encounters were remarkably consistent. Newell Partridge, a local contractor, was watching television on November the 14th, the night before the couple's encounter, when his TV screen suddenly filled with static. His German Shepherd, whose name was Bandit, began howling and scratching at the door. When Partridge stepped outside with a flashlight, he saw two glowing red eyes staring back at him from his hay barn. Bandit ran toward the eyes and was never seen again. The sightings continued. Contractor Raymond Wamsley and his wife were visiting friends when they spotted the creature on their porch. It was so tall that when it stood upright, its head nearly touched the 10-foot ceiling. When it moved, they described a shuffling motion, like it was uncomfortable walking on two legs. But perhaps the most chilling encounter came from Marcella Bennett, a young mother who was visiting friends with her baby daughter. As she got out of her car, she saw the creature standing nearby. She was so scared she dropped her baby's bottle, and as she bent to retrieve it, the Mothman moved closer. She described its eyes as live electrical wires and said it seemed to be studying her with an almost human intelligence. Now, what makes these encounters so unsettling wasn't just the creature's appearance, it was his behavior. Witnesses consistently reported that the Mothman didn't seem aggressive exactly. It was more like it was watching, observing. Some even described feeling like it was trying to communicate something urgent. The media dubbed it Mothman after the Batman TV series, but locals had their own theories. Some believed it was a mutated bird, perhaps a crane or a heron affected by chemicals from the old TNT plant. Others thought it might be an undiscovered species or even something extraterrestrial. Point Pleasant was experiencing a significant UFO flap during the same period. But then came December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge, a vital connection between Point Pleasant and Ohio, and it was packed with rush hour traffic when it suddenly collapsed into the Ohio River. 46 people died in the frigid waters that day, and the town was devastated. Here's where the Mothman story takes its darkest turn. In the days leading up to the collapse, several witnesses reported seeing the creature near the bridge. Some claimed it appeared agitated, more active than usual. A few even described it as seeming to warn them away from the area. After the tragedy, the Mothman sighting stopped almost entirely. It was as if the creature had been trying to warn the town of impending disaster, and once that disaster had occurred, its purpose was fulfilled. So what was the Mothman? Skeptics point to the sand hill crane theory. These birds can stand up to 5 feet tall, they have reddish coloring around their eyes, and they have a wingspan of up to 7 feet. In low light, a startled crane might appear otherworldly to frighten witnesses. But the crane theory doesn't explain the creature's reported speed, its apparent intelligence, or its uncanny connection to the bridge collapse. It also doesn't account for the consistency of witness descriptions across dozens of independent sightings. Some researchers suggest the Mothman might be what's called a crisis apparition, a supernatural entity that appears during times of impending tragedy. Others believe it could be an interdimensional being, somehow able to perceive future events. The truth is, we may never know what the people of Point Pleasant encountered during those 13 months. What we do know is that their experiences were real to them, and the impact on their community was profound and lasting. The Mothman left an indelible mark on Point Pleasant. Today, the town embraces its cryptid legacy with a 12-foot steel statue, the Mothman Museum, and an annual festival that draws thousands. It's become so well known that in 2002, a supernatural thriller was made. The Mothman Prophecies is the most famous Mothman film, starring Richard Gere, and was based on John Keel's book about the actual Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And even more recently, in 2024, Netflix got on board with an episode on Unsolved Mysteries, Volume 4. This Netflix series episode aired in July, and it explores the creature's connection to major disasters, because some people swear that the Mothman still appears around the world before epic disasters like Chernobyl and 9/11. But for those who lived through the original encounters, the memory of those glowing red eyes and massive wings remains as vivid as ever. Was it a misidentified bird, a product of mass hysteria, or something far stranger, a harbinger of doom that tried to warn a town of a tragedy? We may never know what those people experienced in Point Pleasant back in those 13 months during the Mothman sightings. But what we do know is that it is 60 years later, and we are still talking about the Mothman of Point Pleasant. Next time on the Dark Folio, we'll be delving into a dark ledger segment about the Villisca Axe murders, a crime that left 8 people dead and is still unsolved to this day. Thanks for spending your coffee break with me today in the Dark Folio. If you enjoyed this little dive into the strange and unexplained, make sure to follow the show. There are so many more stories waiting in the shadows. And maybe share it with someone who appreciates a good chill down their spine. If you've got your own encounter with the unexplained, reach out. I'd love to hear about it. You might even hear your story in a future episode. Until next time, keep your eyes open, your coffee strong, and remember, the best mysteries are the ones that never quite let you go. I'm May. Keep that flashlight handy, just in case.